Just going to have a little sip from my Squishmallow cup, which I stole from Tabby. It's only good if you're watching the video. Hello and welcome to Widowed AF. I'm your host, I'm Rosie Gill-Moss, and I'm your grief Sherpa, if you will, on this journey. Now, if you are new to the podcast, welcome, thank you for joining us. And if you are a regular listener, welcome back. Can you believe that we are about to enter season 3? I mean, to be honest, when we started, I wasn't sure we'd get an episode 3. Now, joining me today is my alive husband, Jonathan Gill-Moss. Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
And for those of you, again, fresh to the podcast, I thought it might be helpful just to give you a little bit of an idea of who we are and what we do. So if you are a regular listener, you want to chipmunk me about now, put me on double speed to get through this bit. Now, John and I are both widows. My husband, Ben, died in 2018. And John's wife, Sarah, died later the same year. So you can hear our full stories if you go back to season 1. We were right at the beginning. But the podcast came about because essentially we were thrust into this world of being widowed before our time, before our peers, before we'd really had chance to live the lives that we'd been promised. And there just didn't seem to be anything out there that spoke to us. We found a lot of support through Way, Widowed and Young, which is it's a brilliant resource and it's still the first place I point people. But sometimes you need to hear the real experience. There's a real comfort, there's a real power in the sharing of stories, a shared narrative. And that's why widow friendships tend to form and you find your tribe. But actually, in those early days, you perhaps haven't got your tribe yet and you have no clue what lies ahead. And these stories have given people hope, which was something I perhaps didn't expect to come out of this. And so, yes, in theory, this is a really sad podcast. People come, they talk to me, they share their most traumatic experience, they bare their souls. And it's like a condensed therapy session. And something magical happens in these conversations. I've done it myself. I've told my story and it's quite empowering. You feel like you've taken back a little bit of control because you're telling your story in your own way at your own time. Because, within reason, there's very little time constraints as well. And people have really connected to that and responded to it. And I found a connection. I found connections I never expected to. That's been the one, I guess, positive of my grief. Because you meet people that you perhaps would never have met ordinarily, and you form a bond which initially is based around trauma, but then becomes something deep and like you become kind of soul sisters, soul brothers. It connects you on a level. Oh, how many times I'm going to say connect in this episode? Should we time count them? But this kind of soul bearing that goes on these microphones, it's incredibly powerful. And I still feel very humbled that I get to do this, that people trust me to tell their stories and that people are listening out there. And I won't blather on too much, but I just wanted to sort of, explain what it is that we do and why we do it. And the plan for this season, whether it'll continue, I have all the greatest goals in January like the rest of you, is that we'll try and put out an episode a week. So I think we've got 8. I'm going to speak to producer John. How many episodes do we have?
Around 10.
So blimey, I was busy last year. So because we stepped back from doing 2 a week and we went to 1 every other week, just to give a little bit of breathing space for us, because it is quite demanding doing this. But I'd like to do something a bit more regularly. So I think we'll try and put out one of the stories, which is where somebody comes and tells me their story about their life of being widowed, how it's impacted them and how they've helped, I'm going to say heal themselves, but essentially, we know you've got to do it. And then the other episode will be a more informal chat. So something along the lines of what John and I do here. Sometimes it might be John, sometimes it might be me on my own, because I don't think he's managed to get a word in edgeways so far this episode. And sometimes I'm going to invite perhaps former guests or, people who are widowed but maybe don't want to tell their full story but want to talk about what their life is like. So we're going to try a few slightly different formats and see what you guys think. But please do let us know anything that you'd like to see us do. Please don't tell me anything you hate. I've got a very fragile ego, but anything that you'd like to see more of, anything that you really resonated with you, please do let me know. I am open to suggestion, just not criticism. So last time we spoke to you, we were very excited. We were going off to Jamaica for Christmas. We were going to spend Christmas in paradise, those white sandy beaches, that hammock. You know, when the therapist says go to, that picture somewhere in your mind, I'm in a hammock on a sandy beach. It didn't entirely go to plan.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't.
We got to the hotel airport on the Friday evening after having a lovely Christmas day with family who came around, because we had a sort of unofficial Christmas day. And we went to the airport, and I hadn't allowed myself to check the weather in Jamaica. I checked the weather. And we had quite a serious conversation, didn't we, about do we go?
Yeah.
Because it's a long way. It's a long flight. You know that there's going to be an impact with jet lag on the kids. We're quite neurodivergent families. The travel it does take its toll. But we thought, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Are you buckling? Because this is a story. Okay. And so we do the flight, the airport, all the horrors that comes with air travel. And we eventually get to the hotel. I won't bore you by having a first world moan about the hotel not being as expected, but it was a bit shit.
That's really
that's me being very kind.
Underselling this.
That's me being very kind. It wasn't quite the paradise. And then you throw in the fact that the weather was rubbish and all these things. So we're feeling a bit grumpy Brits on holiday. And Hector, our middle son, is starting to look a bit peaky. Now, he's got jet lag and he's struggling with the food there. It's not, he's got quite a selective diet. But he starts to get kind of weaker and weaker. So we can't really go out. We're having taken turns being in the hotel room. And we're really concerned about him. And on Christmas Day, that concern just sort of got too much. And I felt I really needed to have him looked at. So we got the hotel nurse to come and have a look. And she confirmed what we thought, which was that he was very dehydrated. I know, I am going on a bit, sorry. And essentially, me and Hector then had to go to hospital in Jamaica. And it was a tourist hospital, but it was still pretty scary. There was an armed guard on the door. And my American listeners will perhaps be more familiar with this concept. But, in the UK, at point of treatment, we don't pay for our medical care and emergency care. But of course, in the Caribbean, this was a private hospital. So from the minute you arrive, you are almost shadowed by a man with a credit card machine. And they're constantly, I digress, but anyway. So Hector's very poorly. We get him seen and he gets admitted to the ward and they put him on an IV drip and he very quickly starts to recover. But he's terribly phobic of needles and particularly cannulas. So God, you guys will relate if you've got kids, having to get your kid to do something that's for the best, that they really don't want to do. Yeah. And I'm just going to take a minute because this kid was so brave. And he was so stoic and he was trying not to show he was upset in front of me. And I'm saying to him, it's okay to be upset. I'm your mum, I can take it. But it was scary and it was really frightening. And after he had kind of recovered quite well from the IV, we then asked to leave. And they then decided that his condition required him to be admitted to paediatrics. But they didn't have any evidence of this. They wanted to run more tests. They said his liver enzymes were a bit low. Well, he was dehydrated, so they would be. And I realised that I was essentially being kind of manipulated into continuing to pay for treatment. But of course, your mum guilt or parental guilt around this, especially if you are prone to catastrophization and overthinking. By the time I got back to the hotel, having signed a document that said, I willingly removed my son from medical care against advice despite the risks. I was like, what risks? But in the moment, I knew I needed to get him out. He's autistic and he was really struggling with the bright lights and things. So we got him back to the hotel and he did make a full recovery. I will just add in quickly, he's absolutely fine. But it was that I lay awake all night thinking, what if he's got walking pneumonia? What if he's got sepsis? What if I've just signed my son's death warrant? And the cost of the IV was £1,200. Now we can put it on our credit card and our insurance will pay it back. But I was thinking, bloody hell, what if you don't have insurance? I mean, don't travel without insurance, guys, essentially. But I'd shudder to think what an overnight stay would have been.
But then there's also the thing with the travel insurance. Check that because most time you got to pay it.
Yeah, that's it.
You got to pay it
yeah.
and claim back. And if they'd admitted him, and
I reckon we'd be looking at 25 grand.
how are you going to raise that? And you're stuck in a foreign country, so
Got it sat in the current account, doesn't everyone? I am joking. I am joking.
But it's just one of those little things that you don't know until you're faced with it, and the way the hospital were treating you. And I remember texting you because, unfortunately, and probably many other cancer widows will attest, especially if it's to do with the digestional tract. Dehydration is a very real thing, and it shows up in a blood test as a liver enzyme raising.
I tell you what, I was pretty grateful to have my my cancer expert know with that knowledge, because he'd go, liver enzymes, oh my God, what does that mean? I'm trying to get internet connection, I'm trying to ask Dr. Google. But even having to go, because we have other children, obviously we couldn't just abandon them in the hotel. So I had to go on my own, and I felt incredibly vulnerable just going out in a car off to a hospital and having to advocate for Hector to have the strength of conviction that I knew that he was okay to leave and that was the best thing for him. But going against this kind of guilt. And I thought, this is so manipulative. It's preying on a maternal guilt to spend money that isn't required. And actually, I planned to take him to the doctors when we got home, but he's completely fine. He went back to school as normal. So I think what happened was he got this awful flu that's been going around and then got dehydrated. But do you know what? This is a widow podcast, not a my sick kid. But I just wanted to share it with you because, it was a bit of a kick in the fanny, really. And I know that you can't change these things, but we did. I think we all felt a bit defeated. We all felt like we really needed this light, nice holiday because it's on holiday, the kids go back to being kids again, and you go out and have lovely meals, and everything. Sort of the weight of responsibility of home slips off your shoulders a bit.
Bit of reset.
But am I romanticising holidays? Because are they really like that with kids?
Sometimes.
I don't know. Answers on a postcard from wherever you might be with your kids, having a lovely time in the sunshine.
Right.
I think Christmas as well is such an emotive time. It's an emotive time or an emotional time for everybody, because we all or the majority of us put enormous expectations on Christmas and how it's meant to look and appear. And, since when did we have to do like table decorations and stuff? Instagram has got a lot to answer for. But when you are widowed, Christmas, I'm going to just say, I don't think I like Christmas anymore.
No.
I really hate that.
I wasn't really a fan of Christmas before, but that comes from the past. And then with Sarah dying at the end of November, thanks. And, I had to roll pretty much straight into a funeral and then into Christmas because we still had a little girl. I absolutely detest Christmas, and I don't think there's ever a way that I could make it comfortable apart from just not ignore it. But we can't, because the kids need to get the magic, don't they?
They do. And I think, I don't know, because I had a very different childhood. So my childhood memories of Christmas are quite positive. But I do remember the overwhelm and the overstimulation of it. And I used to go and have a bath in the middle of Christmas Day. It was like just a thing I always did at Christmas. And we talked quite a bit in the last episode of season 2. If you haven't listened, it's available everywhere. About this idea of creating a different experience at Christmas, of trying to almost... You can't replicate, can you? You can't replicate the Christmases that you used to have because, they're not here, are they? So it's impossible. And your family dynamic, no matter how connected you are to their family, it will have shifted. There will be there's so many shifts that happen. And so I've done a lot of running from Christmas. I've done several holidays and literally ran into the sea one Christmas Day. In the UK, that was as well. But essentially, it's much like this whole grief analogy, isn't it? We flew to Jamaica to escape feeling sad at Christmas. Well, guess what? Still felt sad on Christmas. And it wasn't just because the hotel was shit and my kid was sick. It was because Christmas is a family time. It's a time where you sing lots of, these loving families all together. And although we're together, it's that weird juxtaposition, isn't it? Where you are in a happy family, but you're also grieving a happy family. It's a very surreal.
And there's also we are in the grand schemes of things, I was with Sarah and you were with Ben. have been together a relatively short amount of time, with 4 kids, both coming from our own Christmases, which you build your own
traditions.
Traditions, that's the word. But then sometimes you don't want to pull all your old traditions into your new relationship because so you got to try and build new traditions whilst just feeling it's all a bit shit anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just a really hard thing to do. So, we try and we'll try
and we're figuring it out.
Figure it out.
And I think last year would have been nice. We went to a hotel in the UK, but I actually ended up in hospital on Christmas Day. Yeah, God, maybe let's just stay home in our pyjamas.
Before, I ended up staying out overseas because I got COVID again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, maybe we should.
There's a pattern.
Yeah, there is. There is, yeah. I think maybe we'll stay in our pyjamas. And actually, we live next door to a very nice restaurant. I'll give the Swan West Malling a little mention. And if they're open on Christmas, I suggest we book a table there and then we don't even have to do any washing up. I'll tell you what, shall I stop planning next Christmas in January? I'm so sorry, listeners. This is not at all entertaining. So we came back from Jamaica and we sort of hit the ground running, so to speak. Nobody says that anymore. They used to always say that in a job interview. We need you to hit the ground running. I'm bringing it back. We came back and we had New Year, and we had a really, really lovely New Year's Eve actually this year. We had a small, a party might be pushing it, a gathering, and we had lots of different friends from different aspects of our lives sort of came together, and I really love it when that happens and it works.
Yeah.
And it is this kind of new community that we're building as a family together here in West Malling where we live. And so we sort of went into the new year feeling kind of pretty good. We did see midnight, actually. The kids saw midnight, and then we tried to get them to bed. And Tabby, who is 7 and just borderline feral, honestly, it was like trying to get your mate at the party that won't give up to go to bed. Yeah, I think I put my headphones in, and she sleeps in our room. I know it's terrible, but I think I put my headphones in and just let her chat away to herself, and I was probably asleep before she was.
I think we both were, actually.
But again, I know I'm banging on about this passage of time and the effect that has on your grief, but New Year, they are left behind another year. It's another year, it's a very obvious passage of time, isn't it? We don't notice the days slipping by, but you notice the years. And this year has a strange date for me because Ben would have been 50, and that's really old. And sorry if anyone's old, but I would have teased him mercilessly. I probably would have had a party for him, which he would have said he didn't want, but actually really liked. And I guess that's, 50th birthdays, that's something that you would celebrate. And I guess, I'm actually sort of toying with doing something on his birthday this year. But I tell you what it is. I've got this, when you do a party when you're a child and you're scared no one will come, I'm like, well, what if I invite people to celebrate his birthday and people don't come? Maybe I just invite you, like to come, wouldn't you? So this is something I definitely wanted to talk about as well. So I've mentioned that I'm coming up to 7 years. You've just passed 6 years. So we're fairly far down the road in terms of the grieving process. Now, I can remember when I joined Way when I was about 6 months into it. And I was a member for quite a long time, but I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, these people are like 7 years and they're still so
hurt.
So broken.
Hurting.
And I was quite scared of that because I thought it wasn't going to get better. You get stuck and you're there forever. And what I now understand is what you see in a Facebook post in a group like Way or any of the other support groups is you're seeing a snapshot. So somebody will post there when they are feeling these big feelings and they need somewhere to express it. But it's not necessary. It might be in some cases, but it's not necessarily an indicator of how they feel all the time. Because that's all you're seeing when you're in those groups, you fear it. You fear getting stuck into grief. And I think sometimes that can kind of propel you to go through it quicker because you're so scared of being 7 years down the line and still feeling the pain that you're in right now. And I guess I'm now realising that I'm still feeling those enormous, overwhelming tidal waves. Fuck it, why is everything water related? Bend around for new listeners. And they come crashing over you, and you do feel like you did back in those early days. You do. The pain feels just as acute. The sorrow, the anger, the injustice. But it doesn't consume you in the same way. It might, and sometimes it might take you down for a day. I'm not going to lie to you out there, but sometimes, even 7 years down the line, your grief will consume you for a day. But what it won't do is have this enormous outreaching impact into every single aspect of your life. It will pass. It will pass.
And that's the key, is you now understand that even though it's there, it doesn't stay.
And I think it's really important that we aren't afraid of saying it. That I actually said to my friend on the school run this week, yesterday, I said, I feel 7 years and people don't want to hear about it. They want to hear that I'm grieving and I tell you what it is. It's fear. It's fear that if something terrible happens to you, that you will still feel terrible in 7 years. Well, yes, you will, but you will also feel absolutely amazing, maybe, or average or normal for quite a lot of the rest of the time. It doesn't. I'm going to tell an analogy that a friend of mine whose son died, she gave me early on, and I have mentioned this before, so forgive me if you're having it repeated. But she said to me, it's grief, and I have my hand in front of my face for those of you who are just listening. It's really, really close. You can't see around your hand. You can't see anything. And then it just sort of pulls back a little and you can peek around it. And so it's always there in your sort of peripheral vision, it never leaves you, but you can see the joy and even just being able to function, right? I just wanted some reassurance that I was going to be able to function, that I was going to want to brush my teeth again, that I was going to be able to giggle with the kids. And I think I want this place to be a reassurance to you that you will feel all of those things again. And don't be afraid of your grief, because it is scary, and we're so scared of being plunged back into that darkness. The thought of it is actually, even as I'm saying it, it's making my skin tingle. The thought of being there.
My therapist once said to me, although it's scary, a scary place to be when you're in the pits of it, the worst has happened. Mm-hmm. So actually all you're doing is reliving that fear of the worst happening inside of your grief as well. And once you start to understand what it is, then you can allow it to be. And then once you allow it to be, it doesn't hit you as often.
And I think so much of that is in the talking. We know that if you say something that you're ashamed of out loud, or even if you say it to yourself in the woods, or you tell the dog or the cat or the pillow, it relieves some of that shame, some of that weight. So I think having somebody that, however you might be 15 years down the line, 20, however far it is, I think we all need somebody that we can talk to about it. And I think you can always say to your friends, are you okay with me talking about this? And I guarantee they're going to say, of course. But there are people, widows and other people who've suffered enormous losses, who have been told not to talk about it. And that it gags you, it silences you, it takes your voice away. And what happens when you can't speak about this pain is you internalize it and you get really sad. And I don't want that for you. So you always have somewhere that you can come and talk about it here. You can always come and you can tell your story on if you wish, or you can just message me and tell me. We all. It might be a therapist. Actually, my therapist. I mean, she's going to need to lie down after this morning's session. Alongside the juggernaut that is Widowed AF, this great, amazing, wonderful baby of ours that we treasure, we have. I have done another podcast. Some of you may have heard me mention this before, but I'd like to kind of get you guys to come over and have a listen to it, because it's called Chatty AF. So it's a similar format to this. It is a conversational podcast where I invite people to come on, or they ask to come on, and they talk about their story. And at the moment, I've done a few conversations with experts. I've done the one with menopause, one on special educational needs, among others. But I want to give a voice to people that have had a unique, it could be a really amazing story, or it could be a tragedy, or it could be, I don't know, that idea that everybody's got a story. Yeah. Okay. So the tagline for Widowed AF is because every widow has a story. Chatty AF, I'd like it to kind of become the place where people with a story come to tell it. And I'm not going to go touting for celebrities and big names. Of course, if you're listening and you'd like to come on, be my guest. But I want this to get like WAF. I want it to be somewhere where, I hesitate to use the word normal, but everyday people, people can come on and have a a platform, a space to talk that they wouldn't necessarily have in ordinary life. So we're going to kick off season 2 of Chatty AF with quite a big episode, okay? It is an episode about suicide, and it is from a father's perspective. And this is a lovely man called Stuart Faulkner, who was a friend of mine. I've known Stuart since I was 17. We separated apart. I haven't spoken to him for a long time, but because of our shared experience of tragedy, we've had some contact. But I'd never really heard his story, you know, because you don't, when somebody's child has taken their own life, and his child was 14, you don't pop round and ask, you know, what led to it or how, and you don't wish to pry. And also I didn't understand. I didn't understand what that enormous loss felt like then, because it was before I'd lost Ben. So Stuart came onto the podcast, we spoke, and it was incredibly powerful, moving, of course. So I would say just approach it with a little caution, but it's not gratuitous in any way. That was never my intention. It is an exploration into the human experience of loss and the loss of a child, and what that means for you, for your relationships, for your other children or child. It's really, really powerful, and I think it's an important listen, because we can't just not talk about it. We can't pretend that an increase in particularly young men taking their own lives is not happening. And I am I feel quite humbled that Stuart came to talk to me, because it's a very difficult thing to talk about, and he did an incredible job. And he set up a charity called the Ollie Foundation, which I will talk more about in the episode. But I would really love you to come and listen to it. If you could leave me a bit of feedback as well at the reviews, that would be really, really helpful. And I've got other guests lined up as well, so there's plenty of episodes. There should be something, I think, a smorgasbord of episodes, something for everyone.
And just to jump in on Stuart's episode from the male's perspective, so you guys out there, I know you're listening because I can see the stats.
I don't see the stats.
What you get from this interview is a man who's gone on a more advanced journey than me. He's obviously further in, because he went off and did a qualification in counselling and explored all the attachment styles. But the impact of what happened with his son forced him to confront his past, to find out why he reacts to certain things in certain ways. And he openly talks, and quite frankly talks, about understanding himself and how he now understands how past relationships didn't have a chance because of what's in the past. And that's very relevant to what us guys are all going through, because of that grief. You know,
Pandora's box gets opened.
Yeah, it hits you, and the only thing you can do is try and put the boxes back as straight as possible. And if you have the energy, have a clean up while you're there.
Yeah.
In order to then build your life forward. And it's the first time I've heard anyone speak about a similar process that I'm still going through. I'm still like learning. I'm just out of the gym, but just out of training, should I say? But it's an incredibly powerful thing to do once you understand that actually I'm reacting to this trivial thing because this plus this plus this plus this, and this is and your brain is designed to protect you. It wants to keep you alive. It does it the wrong way. You know, you might lean into booze. You might drive cars too fast, because that's what your brain thinks is protecting you from the feelings. And it's not the feelings that hurt you, it's the physical that hurts you, but it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, you're right, though. It was an incredibly open interview in terms of him talking about his past, his own mental health struggles, and this idea that when something terrible happens, that will be the factor that drives you to therapy. Most of us, unless we're having problems in our lives, will not just go to talk therapy, because it's expensive and you perhaps think you don't need it. But many of us will have issues that we have repressed, that we don't talk about, that will have impacted, shaped us. And I'm not even talking about enormous trauma here. There'll be things that will impact your reactions to grief and adversity. And if you seek counselling for your grief, some people will do a 6-week course, or they'll do a EMDR or something like that, and that will be it. But for those of us who go into prolonged talk therapy, you will have to do some navel gazing, actually.
The cliche is true. Tell me about your childhood. Or they don't go that direct. They'll just go, oh, but what about this?
Yeah.
And you go, oh, damn you.
Well, I had therapy this morning, and I just saw my friend Jazz, and she said, "Oh, how was it?" And I said, "Well, when you sort of have a raw nerve, and then somebody pokes it, a bit like that today." But I also know that I need that because I mask so efficiently, not just my neurodiversity, but my grief, that I will go in and I probably are, if she would talk to me about, I'm desperate to know about her life. I've known her 3 years, I know nothing. And I'd just go in and sort of, tell her she looks nice because I would be avoidance. I'd be using avoidance because I don't want to poke that raw nerve. But ultimately, and it hasn't been easy. There's been times I've had to be walked into therapy, but I think ultimately the understanding that comes from it is better. But you can hear from Stuart that the work that he has done to rebuild himself because of this cataclysmic event that happened has led to him understanding himself better. And in no way would he, say that his life is better without his son in it, but his understanding of himself is better.
Yes.
And I think it offers a bit of hope because, fuck me, who thinks, you just think, I wouldn't survive that. That would finish me off. And we say that, but actually, he did survive it. And so did Stella, his ex-wife, they did survive it. And it hasn't been easy, but they did. And I think this is why it's important to listen. So I think that's probably it from us for today, but thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing with us. Thank you for listening to my very detailed description of a trip to the hospital. That wasn't anywhere near as detailed as I could have gone. You're very lucky. And I think producer John has a couple of administrative mentions for you.
I do, because obviously sort of running the outside world, it looks like I do nothing, but there's lots of legs running around, so we're going to be launching
lots of legs running
lots
around.
of legs running around. Oh, I don't know. Lots of legs. We're going to be moving the website to a new style of website soon, which should make it easier to manage and for us to start keeping in contact. A newsletter we are going to start going soon, I promise. I know quite a few of you have signed up already and never got an email from me, but it will happen soon. And everybody who is waiting for the invites to come out, they will be out in the next week or so, and we will be booking from February onwards. So when that email comes, get on it, because there's a slot a week and they very, very quickly fill up. We generally get 6 months worth within a couple of days of the emails going out. So keep an eye out.
It's making me blush.
Keep an eye out, and we'll look forward to having you on the show.
Yeah, and actually, guys, if you have got an interesting story, or if you have been a guest on WAF and you would like to come and talk about what your life looks now, if you've made some significant changes, then please do let me know, because I'm happy to talk about pretty much anything. There are some caveats, but pretty much anything. But for now, thank you once again for sticking with us, and lots of love. Take care of yourselves out there. And I'm going to say it, I'll be back with you next week with an episode. There you go, I've committed it now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again, and see you next time on Widowed AF.